I never knew that love could be written in a language designed to kill. My name is Dorothy Hayes. I'm 34 years old, and until 6 months ago, I believed my grandmother Florence was simply a war nurse who married a pilot and lived a quiet life in the English countryside. That changed the day I found a metal box hidden beneath the floorboards of her cottage. A box she made me promise never to open until after she was gone. Inside were letters, dozens of them. But these weren't ordinary love letters written in flowing script and sealed with kisses. These were puzzles, codes, ciphers wrapped inside declarations of devotion. Words that looked like poetry, but held secrets that could save a life. Or end one. What I discovered in those pages revealed a love so dangerous, so impossibly brave, that it rewrote everything I thought I knew about courage, sacrifice, and the power of words carefully chosen. You won't believe what I found inside the first letter, or how a single sentence hidden in plain sight changed the course of 2 lives forever. Let me start at the beginning. England, September 1943. The field hospital at RAF Tangmere smelled of carbolic soap, blood, and the perpetual dampness of the English Channel coast. Florence Ashford had long since stopped noticing. After 2 years of nursing wounded pilots and airmen, her senses had learned to filter out everything except what mattered. Pulse rates, breathing patterns, the subtle signs that separated those who would make it from those who wouldn't. She was 26 years old, though she felt decades older. Her hands, once soft and careful with piano keys, were now rough and steady as they changed dressings, administered morphine, and held the hands of boys who called out for their mothers in languages she couldn't always understand. It was a Tuesday morning when Flight Lieutenant James Hartley was brought in. Florence heard him before she saw him. A roar of voices, the urgent scrape of a stretcher being rushed through the doors, the base commander's clipped tones. RAF's best reconnaissance pilot, shot down over occupied France, made it back by some bloody miracle. Get him stable. She moved quickly, her shoes squeaking on the hospital's linoleum floor. The man on the stretcher was unconscious, his flight suit torn and burned, his face covered in soot and blood. But even through the grime, she could see he was young, perhaps her age, with dark hair matted against his forehead and a jaw set firm even in unconsciousness as if he were still fighting. Shrapnel wounds, possible internal bleeding, the doctor barked. Nurse Ashford, you're with me. Florence worked through the night. Her hands moved with practiced precision, cutting away fabric, cleaning wounds, applying pressure, stitching torn flesh. The pilot stirred once, his eyes fluttering open briefly. They were gray-blue, like the channel on a winter morning, and in them she saw something that made her breath catch, not fear, but a desperate urgency. "The report," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Shh, don't speak," Florence murmured, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You're safe now." "No." His hand shot up, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "Information. Critical. Hidden in my jacket, White must reach command." Then he slipped back into unconsciousness. Florence found it later, when sorting his belongings, a small water-stained notebook tucked into an inner pocket of his flight jacket. She shouldn't have looked. It violated every protocol. But something made her open it. The pages were filled with coordinates, sketches of German installations, troop movements, intelligence that could save hundreds of lives. But they were written in a strange pattern, numbers and letters interwoven with fragments of poetry, lines from Shakespeare, verses that seemed out of place among military observations. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Grid 47.3N, 2.4E. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Artillery position, 50 meters north." It was code. beautiful, literary code. And if it fell into the wrong hands, it would mean nothing. But in the right hands, Florence made a decision that would change everything. She delivered the notebook to the base commander herself, explaining what she'd found. And when James Hartley woke 3 days later, fever finally broken, the first thing he saw was her sitting beside his bed. "You found it," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "The notebook." "I did." "You could have been court-martialed for opening it. You could have died carrying it." Florence met his eyes. "Consider us even." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I'm James." "Florence." "I know. I heard them calling your name." "You have steady hands, Nurse Ashford." "You have a strange way of hiding intelligence reports, Flight Lieutenant Hartley." The smile deepened. "Poetry and coordinates. My English professor would be appalled at the combination." Or rather, impressed. That was the first conversation. There would be many more. Neither of them knew it yet. But in a war that dealt in death and destruction, they had just found something rare and infinitely precious, a reason to survive. James Hartley was supposed to be transferred to a recovery facility in London within a week. But complications, a persistent infection, the doctor's cautious approach, kept him at Tangmere for 3 weeks instead. 3 weeks during which Florence Ashford discovered that the RAF's best reconnaissance pilot was also a former Cambridge literature student who'd enlisted the day after his graduation, a man who could recite Keats while describing the mechanics of aerial photography, who coded his intelligence reports in verse because, as he put it, Jerry's officers know military jargon, but they never read poetry. They spoke in stolen moments, when she changed his dressings, brought his evening medication, or found him awake during her night shifts, staring at the ceiling as air raid sirens wailed in the distance. "Do you miss it?" she asked one night, sitting beside his bed as the walls trembled from distant bombing. "Flying?" "Every moment I'm not in the air." James turned his head to look at her. "Do you ever think about what you'd be doing if there were no war?" "Teaching piano, probably. Maybe performing in London." Florence's fingers moved unconsciously, as if playing invisible keys. "Small concerts, nothing grand. What about you?" "Teaching literature at some dusty university. Writing terribly pretentious poetry that 3 people would read." He smiled. "Strange, isn't it? The war makes us into things we never imagined we'd be. It also shows us what we're capable of." "You mean the coding?" "I mean surviving." Florence held his gaze. "You flew over enemy territory, got shot down, and made it back. That's not just capability, James. That's will." Something shifted in the air between them. It was subtle. A held breath, a heartbeat too long, the awareness of proximity. Florence stood quickly. "I should check on the other patients." "Florence." His voice stopped her. "Thank you for everything." She nodded and left before he could see the flush in her cheeks. The letters began 2 weeks after James returned to active duty. The first arrived at the hospital in a standard military envelope, addressed simply to Nurse M. Ashford. Florence opened it during her break, expecting perhaps a formal thank you note. Instead, she found, "My dearest Florence, I hope this letter finds you well and safe from the storms that rage above us. I think often of your kindness and your steady hands that pulled me back from darkness. The sun rises at 5:47 hours here, painting the sky in shades you would love. Though my days are spent in preparation for flights, my evenings are quiet, and I find myself reading the volume of Keats you saw on my bedside table. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. How true those words ring in such dark times. I wonder if you might write back. Even the simplest news from Tangmere would be a light in these long nights. Yours in gratitude, James. Florence read it 3 times. On the surface, it was a simple, even ordinary letter from a recovered patient. But she noticed the odd capitalizations, the specific mention of time, the reference to storms above us. 547. Grid coordinates? A flight time? She wasn't certain, but something about the letter felt deliberate, coded with more than just affection. She wrote back that evening. Dear James, your letter arrived like a surprise dawn after a long night shift. We are all well here, though the work never lessens. Yesterday we received 12 new patients from a raid over the channel. Difficult cases, but most will recover with time. I haven't played piano in months, but last night I found myself at the old upright in the hospital's recreation room, playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat. The music felt like speaking a language I'd almost forgotten. Stay safe in your flights. The sky may be your realm, but remember there are those of us below who await your safe return. With warm regards, Florence. She didn't know if she'd coded anything meaningful, but 12 new patients felt significant, as did E-flat, perhaps coordinates, perhaps frequencies. She was learning his language. The letters continued, arriving every week, sometimes twice. They spoke of weather patterns and flight formations, of literature and music, of memories from before the war and hopes for after. To anyone who intercepted them, they would seem like nothing more than friendly correspondence between a pilot and a nurse. But Florence began to understand the code. When James wrote about storms approaching from the northeast, he was warning of increased German fighter presence. When he mentioned the temperature dropping to 15 degrees, he was indicating the altitude of reconnaissance missions. When he quoted Romeo and Juliet, night's candles are burnt out, and jocund day stands tiptoe on the misty mountaintops, she knew he was flying at dawn, and she wrote back in kind. Information she overheard from wounded pilots, intelligence about German positions gleaned from delirious confessions, patterns she noticed in casualty reports, all hidden in descriptions of hospital routines, musical compositions, and literary references. They were conducting a covert intelligence operation disguised as a romance, or perhaps it was a romance disguised as intelligence. Florence was no longer certain where one ended and the other began. 3 months after the first letter, Florence's friend and fellow nurse, Claire Morrison, confronted her during a night shift. "You're playing a dangerous game, Maggie." Claire's voice was low, urgent. They were alone in the supply room, the distant sounds of the hospital muffled by thick walls. Florence's heart lurched. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't insult me, I've seen the letters. I've watched you decode them." Claire's eyes were fierce. "I know what you're doing, and if command finds out, if anyone finds out, you could both be court-martialed. Or worse." "Claire, I should report it. By every regulation, I should report it immediately." Claire's hands were shaking. "But I won't. Because I understand why you're doing it. And because..." Her voice broke. "Because my brother was a pilot too. Was. Past tense." Florence reached for her friend's hand. "I'm sorry. Just be careful. Please. The code you're using, it's brilliant, but if German intelligence intercepts even one letter and deciphers it..." Claire didn't finish. She didn't need to. Florence nodded. She knew the risks. They both did. But that night, when she wrote her next letter to James, she didn't stop. Instead, she refined her code, made it more subtle, more beautiful. "My dearest James, the winter roses in the hospital garden are dying, but the matron says they'll bloom again come spring. Underneath the longing in her words was a warning. German positions shifting, new intelligence critical, danger approaching. And woven through it all was the truth she could no longer deny, even to herself. She was falling in love with a man she might never see again. December 1943. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, different from all the others. Florence recognized James's handwriting immediately, but the envelope felt thicker, heavier. Inside were 2 pages instead of 1, and the tone, even before she began decoding, felt urgent, almost desperate. My dearest Florence, I write to you from a place I cannot name, at an hour I cannot specify, with news I can barely contain. We have been briefed on an operation that will change the course of everything. I cannot give you details, but I can tell you this. The preparations remind me of studying for final examinations at Cambridge, weeks of intensive work, reviewing every possible scenario, preparing for a test that will determine everything that comes after. I find myself thinking of Tennyson these long nights. Theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. But I confess, Florence, I have many reasons why I wish to survive what's coming. There is a particular memory I return to again and again. Sitting in that hospital room at 03:30 hours. I remember the exact time. You had just finished your rounds. Watching you read by lamplight, your profile illuminated like something from a Renaissance painting. You were reading Austen, I think, and smiling at something Elizabeth Bennet said. I didn't tell you then that I was awake, watching. I should have. If I could ask one thing of you, it would be this. Continue writing. Even if my responses become irregular or cease altogether for a time, continue writing. Your letters are more than words on paper. They are coordinates that guide me home. With all my heart, James P.S. Do you remember the Chopin you mentioned? Nocturne in E-flat, I believe. I would very much like to hear you play it someday. The timing must be perfect. 0545 hours, they say, is when the light is best for such performances. Florence's hands trembled as she read it a second time, then a third. The surface meaning was clear enough. James was preparing for a major operation and wanted to ensure she'd keep writing. But underneath, 03:30 hours, 05:45 hours, times, coordinates, the references to final examinations, and a test that will determine everything. This wasn't routine reconnaissance. This was something massive, something that would happen at dawn. And the Chopin reference, E-flat. Musical notes translated to coordinates had been part of their code from the beginning. E-flat, 0545 hours. She pulled out her atlas, hands shaking. If she was right, if she was interpreting correctly, "Dear God," she whispered. He was telling her about a raid, a major bombing raid over a critical German position. And the timing, 0545 hours, was when they'd be most vulnerable. But why tell her, unless he needed her to do something with the information? Florence worked through the night, her mind racing. By dawn, she had it. A pattern in James's previous letters, references she'd thought were simply poetic flourishes, but were actually building to this moment. He'd been mapping German defenses for months. Every letter had contained fragments, artillery positions, patrol patterns, blind spots in radar coverage. And now he was giving her the final piece, the target and the timing. But he wasn't asking her to pass it to command. That would have been direct, simpler. No, he was doing something else. He was warning her that the mission was compromised. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The excessive detail, the desperate tone, the emphasis on survival. James knew something was wrong. The Germans might know they were coming. And he needed her to find a way to warn the squadron without exposing their covert correspondence. Florence made a decision that would haunt her for decades. She went to Claire first at 02 hours, waking her friend in the nurse's quarters. "I need your help. I need you to trust me completely." Claire sat up, immediately alert. "What's happened?" "There's going to be a raid, a big one. And the Germans might know it's coming." Florence's words tumbled out in a rush. "I can't tell you how I know, but I'm certain. And if I'm right, dozens of our pilots will die at dawn." Claire studied her face. "This is from his letters." "Yes. And if you report it, they'll want to know how you got the intelligence. Which means court-martial for both of us, possibly execution for espionage." Florence's voice broke. "But Claire, if I don't say something, if I let those men fly into a trap because I'm too afraid to, then you're no better than the enemy." Claire finished quietly. She was silent for a long moment, then stood. "My brother died because someone didn't share critical intelligence in time. I won't let that happen again. Regulations be damned. What do you suggest?" Claire's eyes were fierce. "We find a way to share the information that doesn't implicate either of you. A way that looks like it came from somewhere else." They worked quickly. Claire had treated a German pilot 2 weeks earlier. A Luftwaffe officer shot down over England, wounded but alive, held in the secure ward of the hospital. During his delirium, he'd spoken in German. Most of the staff ignored it, understanding nothing. But Claire had taken notes. Fragments, really. Nothing useful at the time, until now. "We say he became more lucid tonight," Claire explained. "Said something about Morgen früh, tomorrow morning. Mentioned coordinates. We report it to the intelligence officer as a possible delirium-induced confession, something we almost didn't catch. They'll investigate, and if it matches any planned operations, they'll issue warnings without knowing the real source." Florence grabbed her friend's hands. "Claire, this could end your career too. Then we'll face it together." Claire's smile was grim. "Besides, I'm tired of following rules that get good men killed." They went to the intelligence officer at 0300 hours. The report was filed, investigated, and, as dawn broke over RAF Tangmere, an urgent message was transmitted to multiple bomber squadrons. Possible enemy awareness of planned operations. Heightened defenses expected at primary targets. Proceed with extreme caution. Alternate routes advised. Florence stood at the window of the hospital ward, watching the sky lighten, wondering if she'd just saved James's life, or if she'd already lost him forever. The bombers returned at 11:47 hours. 8 planes had been lost, a devastating number, but command confirmed it would have been twice that without the warning. The Germans had indeed known they were coming, had repositioned artillery and fighter squadrons precisely where they'd be most effective. Without Florence's intervention, without James's coded warning and her willingness to risk everything, the entire operation might have ended in catastrophic failure. But James's plane was not among those that returned. For 3 days, Florence moved through the hospital in a fog. She worked her shifts mechanically, changing dressings, administering medications, comforting the wounded. While inside, something vital was dying. Claire said nothing, but her presence was constant, steady. On the 4th day, Florence received a visit from the base commander. "Nurse Ashford, a moment of your time." Her heart stopped. This was it. They'd discovered the letters, the code. She was about to be arrested. Instead, the commander said, "We've received word. Flight Lieutenant Hartley was shot down over occupied France 4 days ago. He was seen parachuting from his aircraft, but we've had no contact since. He's officially listed as missing in action." Missing. Not dead. Missing. Florence's world tilted. However, the commander continued, We've also intercepted German communications suggesting they're searching for a downed RAF pilot in the region. Intelligence believes he may be evading capture, possibly with assistance from the French resistance. We're monitoring the situation." He paused, studying her face. "I understand you corresponded with Lieutenant Hartley. I wanted you to hear this directly rather than through rumors. If there's any change in his status, you'll be informed." "Thank you, sir." As he turned to leave, he added quietly, "The intelligence officer mentioned your timely report about the German prisoner's confession. It saved lives, Nurse Ashford. Whatever prompted you to pursue that lead, good instincts." When he was gone, Florence sank onto her bed and allowed herself to feel, just for a moment, the crushing weight of everything. James was alive. Probably. But he was behind enemy lines, hunted, alone. And she had no way to reach him. January 1944. The winter was brutal. Florence moved through it like a ghost, maintaining her duties while internally living in a state of suspended terror. No word came about James. No intelligence, no reports, no confirmation of life or death. The hospital filled with casualties from the Italian campaign, boys with frostbite and shrapnel wounds who cried out in their sleep. Florence tended them all, her hands still steady, her face composed. But Claire saw the truth. Her friend was breaking. "You need to sleep," Claire said one night, finding Florence in the supply room at 0400 hours, organizing bandages that were already perfectly organized. "You'll collapse if you keep this up." "I can't sleep." Florence's voice was flat. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him falling, or captured, or—" "Stop! You don't know what's happened. Until you do, you hold on to hope." "Hope?" Florence laughed bitterly. "Hope is a luxury I can't afford." Then, on a gray morning in late January, a letter arrived. Not through military post. Not through official channels. It came hidden inside a Red Cross package, slipped between bandages, addressed to no one and signed by no one. Florence discovered it by accident, unpacking supplies, and felt her heart stop when she recognized the handwriting. The letter was damaged, water-stained, torn at the edges, written in faint pencil on paper that looked like it had been ripped from a schoolbook. But it was unmistakably his. "I write this not knowing if it will ever reach you, but I must try. I am alive. Injured but recovering, hidden by people whose bravery shames me. I cannot tell you where, but I think of that night at 0330, of lamplight and Austin, and it keeps me breathing. There is so much I wish I'd said when I had the chance. So many words I coded into poetry when I should have simply spoken them plain. I love you. I have loved you from the moment you held my hand in that hospital bed and told me I was safe. I love you in a way that terrifies me because I may never get the chance to tell you in person. But you saved me, Florence. The warning you managed to send, and I know it was you, I know it in my bones, gave us the seconds we needed to evade the worst of the German defenses. My crew made it out because of you. I didn't, but they did, and that matters more than my own survival ever could. I'm going to try to make it back. There are plans being made, routes being mapped. But if I don't, if this is the last you hear from me, please know that you gave me something I didn't think possible in this war. You made me believe in futures worth surviving for. Keep playing Chopin. Keep being brave. Keep saving lives with those steady hands. Forever yours, Jay. Florence read it 17 times, memorizing every word, every loop of his handwriting, every water stain that might have been tears or rain or river water. He was alive. He loved her. And he was trying to come home. Claire found her an hour later, still clutching the letter. He's alive, Florence whispered. James is alive. Claire pulled her into a fierce embrace. Thank God. Oh, thank God. He said I saved him. The warning. He knew it was me. Of course he did. Claire pulled back, gripping Florence's shoulders. So now what? Now? Florence looked at the letter, then at her friend. Now I do what he asked. I keep being brave, I keep working, and I wait. That's all you can do? Florence smiled for the first time in weeks, fragile but real. No. There's one more thing. That night, Florence sat down at the old upright piano in the hospital's recreation room. Her fingers found the keys, rusty from months of neglect, and began to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The notes filled the empty room, melancholic and beautiful, full of longing and hope intertwined. She played it perfectly, every phrase shaped with emotion she'd held back for so long. Wounded soldiers in nearby wards paused in their conversations. Nurses stopped in hallways to listen. Even the doctors, hardened by years of carnage, stood still for a moment. The music said everything she couldn't. I'm here. I'm waiting. Come home to me. When she finished, Claire stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. He'll hear that somehow, Claire whispered. Wherever he is, he'll hear it. February 1944. The second letter came 3 weeks later, smuggled through the same underground network. Florence, I heard you playing. Not literally. I'm still in France, still moving through networks of impossibly brave people who risk everything to help Allied servicemen escape. But last night, in a farmhouse cellar, an old woman had a radio. For just a few minutes, we caught a BBC broadcast of Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat. It was scratchy and faint, but I knew. I knew you were playing it for me wherever you were. I'm coming home. It may take weeks, maybe months, but I'm coming home to you. There are routes through Spain, connections being made. I won't stop until I'm back on English soil. But Florence, I need to tell you something. The intelligence work we've been doing, the coded letters, the information we've shared, it's more important than either of us realized. I've seen things here, learned things about German positions and plans that could change the course of the war. And I've realized that our correspondence, our codes, could be a model for something bigger. When I return, and I will return, we need to bring this to command. Officially. Yes, we'll face consequences for the unauthorized intelligence work. But what we've created, this system of literary coding, could save thousands of lives if implemented properly. Are you willing to face that? The questions, the investigation, the possible charges? I won't ask you to risk everything for this, but I had to tell you what I'm thinking. All my love, Jay. Florence sat with the letter for a long time, weighing the implications. Coming forward would mean admitting to months of covert intelligence work. Court-martial was a real possibility. At minimum, disgrace and discharge. But James was right. What they'd created, a code so subtle, so literary, that even if intercepted, it appeared to be nothing more than love letters, could revolutionize intelligence operations. It could save countless lives. She picked up her pen. My dearest James, yes, to all of it, yes. Come home to me. We'll face whatever comes together. I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer, but hurry. The world is changing, and I want to see what comes next with you beside me. All my heart, Florence. She sent it through the Red Cross network the next morning, not knowing if it would reach him, but trusting in the network that had already delivered miracles. Then she went back to work, to steady hands and careful stitches, to saving lives one patient at a time. And she waited. March 1944. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered to the hospital by a grim-faced military courier. Florence was changing dressings in the officers' ward when the matron found her. Nurse Ashford, my office, now. Florence's blood turned to ice. She'd received telegrams before, every nurse had, delivering news of brothers, fathers, sweethearts killed in action. The matron's face told her this was one of those moments. She followed numbly, already preparing herself for the words, "We regret to inform you." But instead, the matron handed her the telegram with an expression Florence couldn't read. Flight Lieutenant James Hartley returned to British custody, arrived Gibraltar, 0800 hours. Transport to England arranged, arrival. RAF Tangmere estimated 16 March 1944. Patient requires medical evaluation upon arrival. Request Nurse M. Ashford be assigned to his care. Florence read it 3 times before her brain processed the words. "He's alive," she whispered. "He's alive," the matron confirmed, "and apparently he specifically requested you." Florence looked up, and for the first time in months she felt something unfurl in her chest that might have been joy. "When?" "Tomorrow. He arrives tomorrow." March 16, 1944 was cold and gray, typical English weather that turned the airfield into a muddy expanse under low clouds. Florence stood on the tarmac in her nurse's uniform, Claire beside her, both of them watching the horizon for the transport plane. "You're shaking," Claire observed. "I know." "Are you ready for this?" "I have no idea." The plane appeared at 13:47 hours, a dark shape cutting through the clouds, growing larger until Florence could hear the engines, could see the RAF roundel on its side. It landed heavily, taxied to a stop, and after an eternity, the door opened. 3 men emerged first, debriefing officers, Florence assumed. Then a 4th figure appeared in the doorway, moving slowly, carefully. James. He was thinner than she remembered, his face gaunt and shadowed with exhaustion. He wore a borrowed uniform that didn't quite fit, and he moved like every step caused pain. But he was standing. He was real. Their eyes met across the tarmac. Florence didn't remember moving. One moment she was standing beside Claire, the next she was running, propriety and protocol forgotten, crossing the distance between them. James stepped down from the plane, and then she was there, and he was catching her, pulling her into his arms, and they were both crying and laughing and holding on like they would never let go. "You came back," Florence sobbed into his shoulder. "You actually came back. I promised you I would." James's voice was rough, breaking. "I promised." The debriefing took 17 hours. Florence wasn't allowed in the room, but Claire brought her updates in whispers. James had spent 2 months evading capture, had been sheltered by the French resistance, had walked over 100 miles through occupied territory to reach the Spanish border. He'd carried intelligence the entire way, information about German positions, troop movements, defense installations, all memorized and coded in case of capture. And he'd told them everything about the letters. "They want to see you," Claire said quietly, finding Florence in the hospital late that evening. "The intelligence officers, they want to understand the code you two created." Florence stood, smoothing her uniform, and walked into a reckoning she'd been preparing for since the first letter. The interview room was stark. Bare walls, a single table, 3 officers who studied her with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. "Nurse Ashford, you understand the seriousness of unauthorized intelligence operations?" "Yes, sir." "Flight Lieutenant Hartley has explained the nature of your correspondence, the creative coding system you developed together." The lead officer, a colonel with gray hair and sharp eyes, slid a stack of letters across the table. Her letters, all of them, intercepted and analyzed. "Do you deny any of this?" "No, sir. I don't deny it. You understand that conducting covert intelligence work without authorization is grounds for court-martial? For both of you. Yes, sir. Then why did you do it? Florence met his gaze steadily. Because lives were at stake. Because we had information that could save people and the official channels were too slow, too bureaucratic. Because in war, sometimes you have to choose between following rules and saving lives. That's not your decision to make, nurse. With respect, sir, when a pilot is bleeding out on my table, every decision is mine to make. This was no different. The colonel studied her for a long moment, then surprised her by smiling, a brief, grim expression. Flight Lieutenant Hartley said you'd say that. He also said the warning you managed to deliver in December saved his entire squadron from a massacre. It wasn't just me, sir. We know. We've reviewed everything. He leaned back. Here's what's going to happen. Officially, this goes in your permanent records, both of you, as unauthorized intelligence activity. You'll both receive formal reprimands. That's non-negotiable. Florence's heart sank. However, the colonel continued, we're also recommending both of you for commendations. The intelligence you gathered, the coding system you developed, it's brilliant, frankly. We're already discussing implementation across multiple units. Literary coding, using classics and poetry as cipher frameworks. The Germans will never see it coming because they're looking for mathematical patterns, not Shakespeare. Florence stared. You're using our system? With proper authorization this time, yes. The colonel's expression softened slightly. You two accidentally created something valuable, Nurse Ashford, and we'd be fools not to recognize that. He stood, signaling the interview was over. Flight Lieutenant Hartley is being discharged from active flying duty due to his injuries. He'll be reassigned to intelligence, helping implement and teach the new coding protocols. We'd like to offer you a similar position, training nurses and radio operators in covert communication techniques. And if I refuse? Then you'll continue your nursing duties with a reprimand in your file, and we'll find someone else to train. But I think you're better than that. Florence thought of James, of all the pilots who died because information came too late or not at all, of the letters that had saved lives hidden in plain sight. I'll do it, she said. She found James in the hospital garden an hour later, sitting on a bench under a bare oak tree, his face turned up to the sky. He looked exhausted, worn thin by months of survival, but also somehow at peace. They're letting us work together, Florence said, sitting beside him. I know. They told me. James reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Are you angry? I essentially confessed to everything. No, you did the right thing. She squeezed his hand. We both did. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything settling around them. The war was still raging. The work ahead would be difficult. They'd both carry scars, physical and emotional, for the rest of their lives. But they were alive. They were together. And the code they'd created out of love and desperation was going to save countless others. Florence, James said quietly, there's something I need to ask you. Something I should have asked in the letters but couldn't find the right code for. What? He turned to face her fully, his gray-blue eyes intense and serious. When this war finally ends, and it will end someday, will you marry me? Florence felt tears prick her eyes. That's not coded very subtly. I'm done with codes. I want to say this plainly, in words that mean exactly what they sound like. I love you, Florence Ashford. I want to spend whatever life we have left together. No secret meanings, no hidden messages, just truth. Yes, Florence whispered. Yes, James. 1,000 times yes. He kissed her then, gentle and careful, like she was something precious he'd almost lost. And in that moment, in a garden surrounded by a hospital full of wounded soldiers, in the middle of a war that had taken so much from so many, they held on to each other and chose hope. The letters had saved his life, but she had saved his soul. And he, in turn, had saved hers. May 1945. The war in Europe ended on a Tuesday. Florence heard the news in the intelligence training room where she'd been teaching a group of radio operators the fundamentals of literary coding. The announcement crackled through on the wireless. Germany had surrendered. The fighting was over. The room erupted in cheers, in tears, in embraces between people who'd been strangers 6 months before, but were now bonded by shared purpose and survival. Florence stood still for a moment, unable to fully process it. Over. The war was actually over. She found James in his office. He'd been promoted to major, put in charge of the entire literary coding program. He was standing at the window, staring out at Tangmere, at the airfield that had seen so many departures and too few returns. "It's done," she said from the doorway. "It's done," he agreed, turning to face her. 6 months of proper food and rest had restored some of the weight he'd lost, though he still limped from his injuries and probably always would. But he was here. He was whole in the ways that mattered. "What happens now?" Florence asked. "Now?" James smiled, that real smile she'd fallen in love with. "Now we get to find out who we are when we're not at war." They were married in June in a small ceremony at a village church near Tangmere, with Claire as maid of honor and James's surviving squadron mates as witnesses. Florence wore a simple dress, no fancy wedding gown, not yet, those were still hard to come by, and carried wildflowers from the field where they'd first walked together. The ceremony was brief, the vows traditional, but when James slipped the ring onto her finger, he whispered something only she could hear. "No codes, just love." "Just love," she whispered back. The letters they'd written, all of them, were classified by intelligence, locked away in archives as examples of successful covert communication. But Florence had kept one, the very first one James had sent from active duty, hidden in a box with her most precious possessions. Sometimes she'd take it out and read it, remembering the woman she'd been when it arrived. Scared, hopeful, learning to love in a language designed for war. She'd become someone different since then, stronger perhaps, more certain of what she was capable of. The war had taken so much, but it had also given her something unexpected, proof that love could survive anything if you were brave enough to fight for it. By autumn, they'd moved into a small cottage in the countryside, far from the airfields and hospitals that had defined their war. James took a position teaching literature at a university, returning to the career he'd imagined before the war interrupted everything. Florence returned to music, giving piano lessons to village children who'd never heard of Chopin's coded messages, or nocturnes played as prayers for survival. Their lives became ordinary, beautifully ordinary, in ways they'd once feared they'd never experience. But on quiet evenings, when the sun set and the world grew still, they would sit together in their garden, and James would pull out a notebook, not unlike the one Florence had found in his flight jacket all those years ago. And he would write, not codes, not intelligence reports, just poetry. Simple, honest poetry about love and survival and the extraordinary miracle of having made it through. "What are you writing about?" Florence would ask. "Us," he'd answer. "Always us." And Florence, resting her head on his shoulder, would smile and think about the letters that had saved his life, the code they'd created out of necessity, and the love that had survived when survival itself seemed impossible. They'd made it, Against all odds, through all darkness, they'd made it home. I'm sitting in my grandmother's cottage now, the metal box open on the table in front of me. Letters spread around me like pieces of a puzzle I'm still learning to assemble. Florence passed away 3 months ago at 107 years old, with her mind sharp until the very end. James had died 5 years earlier at 103, holding her hand, his last words a line from Keats. "A thing of beauty is a joy forever." At the funeral, she'd whispered to me, "The box is yours now, Dorothy. The box and the story. Tell it. Tell it so people remember that love is worth fighting for, even when the whole world is burning." So I opened it. I read everything. And I spent months decoding the letters, piecing together the intelligence hidden in poetry, the coordinates disguised as musical references, the warnings wrapped in declarations of love. What they created, what my grandparents created out of desperation and courage, changed intelligence operations for decades. The literary coding system they developed was used throughout the remainder of World War II in Korea, even into the early Cold War, before computers made such elegant solutions obsolete. But the letters themselves were never about the war. Not really. They were about two people who found each other in the darkest period of human history and refused to let darkness win. They were about choosing love when hate seemed easier, about trusting someone enough to speak in codes that meant "I love you" and stay alive in the same breath. My grandmother left me one final letter, sealed separately, with instructions to open it only after I'd read everything else. I opened it this morning. "Dearest Dorothy, if you're reading this, you've finished the others. You know our story now, the real one, not the sanitized version we told at dinner parties or the abbreviated version in history books. I want you to understand something. The codes, the intelligence work, the commendations, none of that mattered. What mattered was that in a world trying to tear us apart, we found a way to stay connected. We turned war into words, fear into poetry, danger into declarations of love. You're named after me, my darling girl. Dorothy Florence Hayes. And I hope you find someone worth writing coded letters for, worth risking everything for, worth surviving for. The war taught me that love isn't safe or convenient or easy, but it's the only thing that survives when everything else burns down. Keep the letters, keep the story. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to stop loving, no matter what the world throws at you. All my love, across all the years, your Gran. I'm crying as I finish reading. The cottage is quiet except for the old grandfather clock James restored ticking in the corner, counting down moments he's no longer here to see. But their love is still here. In these letters, in this story, in me. And now I'm asking you, which part of this story surprised you most? Was it the coded intelligence hidden in love letters? The bravery of ordinary people doing extraordinary things? The fact that their system actually changed how intelligence work was done? Leave a comment below and let me know. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that love and courage can survive anything, please subscribe. There are more stories like this. Stories of ordinary people who lived through extraordinary times and refused to let those times define them. My grandparents taught me that love is the code that never breaks. I hope they've taught you that too.